Hi, Kasper.
Hi, Kim.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So I understand Home.Earth is breaking ground on a new development this summer with the goal of being climate positive and affordable. How's that going? And can you share some of your regenerative design approaches for the project?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is our first pilot project trying to reinvent real estate. We have high ambitions on being people positive and planet positive. I think that's really the end goal to try and leave positive footprints environmentally and socially. So the first project is 150 units with a high diversity of apartments and commercial activities and common activities that reflect society. So we really want to try and tailor a product or a delivery that reflects society. So we want to have a place where people live, where they work, where you meet high and low, and then we are as developers really trying to weave this community together. So in many ways you can say that it's a city life as we want it to be, and in the end we want people to be welcome and feel as part of their like ordinary lives, but it is actually very different in order to achieve this. So the diversity is really a way to try and make people meet and offer some difference from an ordinary new development.
Okay, that sounds great. When we consider the big picture, cities themselves are the biggest thing that we humans build. I believe it's estimated there will be, by 2030, there will be 8.5 billion people on the planet. A large majority will be living in cities. In order to handle that, how do we motivate our architects, developers, and citizens to embrace or engage in the circular economy and regenerative architecture now and not 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's a huge industry and a huge responsibility, and we can make a huge impact with how we design for the developments of our cities. I think we're trying to work with different bottom lines. So we do like a triple bottom line where we have a financial focus. This is a scalable business. It's not just a demonstration of doing good, but we also are very careful in what are the social and environmental values that we create. So we believe that we can make a community that is attractive and that is rich on diversity, as said, but also one where we have less risk, where we have residents that takes ownership, where we have you can say like a more secure investment. So the way we tailor the development is really through a kind of financial logic, and where we see what is the value of having a social inclusivity and environmental, you can say, caterings. So doing that, obviously, we also take a long perspective, so we keep our buildings as owners. So we have an evergreen horizon where we then can also talk about life cycle costing, like investing into quality, also designing our assets for circularity. So we do map out all buildings in material passports. We design for flexibility and disassembly and reuse. And we are also the caretakers of our own buildings. So it's also about better maintenance and better, you can say, quality over time. And that goes from everything from the kind of embodied carbon in the materials, but also to the energy production and the operational carbon.
Okay, so looking at it more as a whole piece that you're looking at for longevity, that would be a good focus for people to change their views, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely change your perspective, having the ownership of the buildings that you develop. Most developments have a lot shorter perspective, so you need to bring the value to the table within 1 to 3 to maybe 5 years from your opening. And here we actually can take some longer perspectives that allows for different thinking.
Okay. One of your passions is material science. And I was wondering, are there any new materials that could change the way that we build today that you've researched or used?
Yeah, I think to me, I mean, I'm really into materials, and I like design, also the design of a kind of material scale and all the possibilities that are out there. But I'm not in particular into one category, but one filter that kind of is a way to view the world is the carbon intensity. Like, what is the embodied carbon of materials? In Denmark, we have a very strong tradition of precast concrete, and there are many benefits to that. It's very scalable. It's also very cheap. It's very stable. It's also very carbon intensive. So if you look at your built environment and consider what is the climate impact of the materials you choose, it's a complete different picture that you start to view the world with. I also think it's important to have materials where people are living. Like, what do you touch? What do you see? It has a huge importance in the narrative of your building and in the emotions that you stimulate. So we are very focused on bringing, you can say, like, more warm, tactile, bio-based materials to the touch and the feel, but also to the structure. We are working with a material filter on everything in interior exposed. We need to have like a very precise understanding of the indoor air quality, of the off-gassing of materials. So it's really not about colors or compositions. It's very much about you can say, like, environment and you can say also the emotions that you stimulate with the materials you choose. But those are the thoughts that we have to the developments we are doing right now.
That sounds like a good list of criteria. Yeah, I've heard you say before that you would like industry to see buildings as material banks. I was wondering if you could expand on that concept and give an example of a project where you utilize this.
Yeah, I mean, the financial logic in today's investment perspective is that you have a full value of a building when you inaugurate it, and then you depreciate it to zero over a lifetime of 20 to 30 years. But there's an intrinsic value, and we see that in the potential reuse of materials, how we treat our buildings, how we maintain them, and also, of course, how we then are recycling the layers of the buildings due to the lifetime of the use. So we have a value to our buildings, even we've had an operation for 10 and 20 and 30 years. So the intrinsic value is really your building as a material bank. How many quantities and qualities do we have of good steel, of good timber, that can be reutilized and in that way represents a value ongoingly.
Okay. But so it's about reuse and not just putting it into a landfill. It's not going to waste.
It's very much about that. It's also about enabling a circular future. One thing is that everything is market driven, and it needs to have scale, and it's hard to prove a circular market on all product categories today. But if we don't enable, if we don't design for disassembly, and if we don't document the values and the lifetimes of our buildings, we won't be able to put it to a future circular marketplace. So it's also about preparing for a circular future by being very kind of precise in the information we want to collect today.
Right. Okay. I've heard you mention Canadian architect Peter Busby when you've talked of regenerative architecture. What was it about his work that inspired you?
Well, I think it's about architecture to represent more than just its geometrical boundaries. It's also the impact that you can achieve with your cities, with your buildings. How can we make cities as forests where you can purify the air, where you can reuse your materials, where you can harvest energy? And I think those are some of the aspirations that I've talked with him about at various venues where we've met. And I think it's this way we want to do more. We want to create these positive footprints with what we do. I remember the SERS building in Vancouver. First time I visited it, were also it felt different. I mean, you had a conference center that was daylit. You had energy exchange with neighboring buildings. You had like a living facade. You also have a living machine to like clean the water of the building. And all of this was kind of woven into the architecture. So it becomes almost like a kind of a dynamic entity and not just a static building.
Okay. And what advice would you give to young architects who are interested in regenerative architecture? I know you've co-authored several books, but I wondered if you had a roadmap or advice for them.
Well, I think it's always to try to do more with your building than the basic needs of an architectural program. It's not just solving the functions; it's adding quality. So how can a building do more? And it can be on a social level, it can be on an environmental level, it can be giving back to the city. So beyond its own physical boundaries. But I also think it's about not taking no for an answer. Like that's not possible. So like keep pushing forward, and maybe you can't find a solution from the viewpoint you have today, but if you move around and change perspective, you might come to a solution. So I've got a lot of motivation and energy when I was told that things were not possible. So I think that's also what we do in Home.Earth. We also try to develop a new kind of financial model of how we create revenue for our stakeholders. All stakeholders, both our residents and our financials investors. So like redefining revenue, not taking no for an answer, and try always to get it into kind of a design output, not just an Excel output. I think that's one important thing to strive for. Okay,
well, that's great. Well, I had one last question, and that is, as I understand it, donut economics is the balance between social and planetary boundaries, ensuring that basic needs are met for all without putting too much pressure on our ecosystem. Can you expand on that as it relates to the built environment?
Yeah, no, I think this is the next frontier. of understanding sustainability. I think today most arguments are done in a relative logic. We need to reduce 25% relative to last year. So it doesn't really tell you if it's good or bad, it's just relative. And the planetary boundaries, that is a scientific framework of the donut economics, tells you what can the planets actually regeneratively deal with. So there is a limit. There's a limit to the footprint we can put to CO2. For example, yeah, I guess the roadmap to 1.5 degrees is really the planetary boundaries of what the Earth can do before there is an ecosystem collapse. So it's super hard because it goes from a planetary level. How do we then scale it back to countries, to industries, to square meters, to person load? But we are doing that in Home.Earth. We are making an open method of a donut economy for the building industry. So we're actually currently involved trying to tackle that and how to measure it, and also providing tools of how to deal with it. So it's short answer, it's a next frontier of understanding sustainability. It's a huge task because we are obviously on an overconsumption, and how can we actually scale it back to an Earth in balance?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, but it's good to hear that you're working towards that. Okay, well,
yeah, most certainly are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kim.